Alright, in this video, I want to talk about a couple of movies here. They're horror movies. Yet, I'm actually going to recommend watching them and especially showing them to your children of reasonable age. And I'll explain why. First of all, these movies, they're not getting into grotesque, dirty language, sexual content. One of them has a little bit of gore, but there are good messages from these movies. The first one here is Pie Wacket. Now, of course, I'm going to tell you about the movies, not in great detail. So I'm going to give away the movie, the whole plot and everything. So, spoiler alert, I guess, even though it should not be a big deal. But anyway, in this first one here, Pie Wacket, a little girl is struggling with her mom. I don't remember if the father left or died, but her and her mother are struggling after the loss of the father, and they're not getting along, and she's a teenager, and she ends up getting into some witchcraft stuff, kind of messing around with it, and after a big fight with her mother, she does some ritual that's supposed to, I think, actually kill her mother. You may be thinking, hey, this is pretty crazy. Why would I want to show this to my children? And I don't mean like young children. I'm thinking more teenager, right? A bit more mature, to get a message across to them about being sober-minded, right? You don't want to be drunk. You don't want to be high on the devil's lettuce there, or on any kind of opioid, fentanyl and all this stuff going around these days. You want to be sober-minded and not just away from drugs, but with your thoughts in general, that they need to be on a solid ground, on a firm foundation, that you need to be into the Word of God because it acts as a hedge around you to protect you from what ends up happening here. You see, she does this ritual to have her mother die, right? But of course, she changes her mind, right? And she doesn't want it to happen, but she realizes that there's weird spiritual things going on, that something is going to happen to her mother, right? So she learns how to reverse this curse that she did. She has to do the exact same ritual, but backwards, right? And she's warned that this spirit that she's dealing with is deceptive. And when she goes out to this wooded area outside of her home to do this ritual again, but in reverse, she sees her mother laying down in the woods, but she also hears her mother calling for her back at her house, telling her to come in. And when she sees her mom laying down in the woods, she appears to be dead. So she's confused. She's like, I see my mother dead. This is the ritual that I wanted to do. The woman that's calling me is not really my mother. This is that spirit, right? So she already has that in her head, that this person calling her is someone different, like a shapeshifter of sorts. And her mom is upset because she ends up finding out she went out in the woods and she found some knife that she was using, and it had blood on it or something, and noticed that she cut her hand or her wrist because part of the ritual had to do with blood, and she's getting upset about her doing that, and she thinks that this is some just demon messing with her, not even her real mother. And it gets to the point where she's very well convinced that this is a demon, and the movie gets you to think, okay, yeah, her mom is really dead in the woods. So what does she do? Something really crazy. I'm not going to tell you how she does it, but she decides that she needs to kill this demon. So she does something to kill this uh, thing that appears to be her mother. Well, it turns out that the trick was that her mother was alive, and that dead body that she saw was all in her head. She was tricked into thinking that her mom was already dead, and tricked into thinking that her real mom was the demon. So her ritual messed with her mind. She allowed the enemy in to get her to fulfill her own wish, her own desire that her mother would die. So she ended up killing her own mother, and she was deceived into doing so. And that's why I would say, you know what, if you want to have a horror movie to really get through to your children about how the world and the spirit of the world, the devil, will manipulate you into turning on your family and against your parents to get you to think that they're the evil ones. Because that's exactly what the world does today, right? And this one isn't gruesome. It's not full of dirty language, all kinds of sexual content. It's pretty PG, more of a suspense thriller, pretty scary, creepy moments. Ultimately, how she ends up killing her mother is a whoa kind of thing. Like, I don't know how uncomfortable that's going to make you feel, but it's pretty shocking. Like, the way the devil twists your mind, right? And I think it's something that you could use to talk to your children about. Because I didn't grow up Christian, and I would watch things with my dad, not necessarily horror movies, but he basically everything I watched with him. He didn't let me go watch things on my own, so he could talk to me about everything I was watching, whether it was some cartoon or some movie, or it's a movie that he wanted to watch. He could talk to me about stuff going on in it, and he would tell me like life lessons from it. And like, oh, you see them doing this in this show or this movie, I catch you doing that, and I'm going to whoop your ass. So it's something you could do as well, right? This is a very good movie to do that, and one that's similar to this, but it does have a little bit of gore to it. Um, is this movie here, Cobweb? And it's similar in the sense that this little boy hears a voice coming from his wall when he's going to bed. It sounds like a little girl. And this voice tells him that she is his sister, and that basically his parents are kind of evil, right? Excuse me. And that eventually uh, convinces him that his parents want to kill both of them, right? And excuse me, he should know that the spirit or person, because you can't quite tell at first if it's spirit or a person talking to him, or really what's going on. You can tell that it's not a I'm for you kind of spirit, as it gets him to deal with a bully at school in a very violent way. I think it ended up pushing him down some stairs where the bully broke his leg. And you think there that this young boy would realize that this spirit talking to him is not as nice and as friendly as you think, right? That maybe your parents aren't the bad ones. They're trying to protect you from something, because eventually the parents realize that there's something actually talking to him, and they start to get scared about it, and they want to take care of this. So they're very uh, quick to get to punishment. Not that they beat him or do any torture to him, but I think they locked him in the basement for a while, and I think that was the worst thing they did to him. And so he couldn't do anything like a normal kid would do. He just had to sit there and think about what he's done and all this, especially when he broke that kid's leg. And I know I think it's a weird punishment, but I mean, it's a movie, and people can raise their kids how they want, right? I mean, he broke some kid's leg. I mean, you can't just not punish the kid. You got to do something, right? So it's like, the parents, with their wisdom that they have, they deal with the child. But the father had some uh, rat poison that he used to take care of rats, obviously, right? And the child noticed that, hey, that it smelled like cinnamon. So this is a key point in the movie to take note of, that, oh, this rat poison smells like cinnamon. And he's telling him, well, we got to get rid of the rats because they can be a nuisance. They can damage the property. They can bite you and give you a disease, or they can spread it through their turds in the food or whatever when they eat the food. So you got to get rid of them. And later on, since this voice convinces him that his parents are the evil ones, he ends up mixing this rat poison into the soup. And then the husband, when he's eating, starts to talk to his wife about, hey, this is different. What'd you do different? She's like, nothing. What do you mean? He's like, there's just something different about the soup. And she starts eating some. And then she's like, she smells it. And she says, it smells like cinnamon. And that's where the father realizes, hey, something's wrong. He looks over at the son, and the son's not eating any. So you see here that that son was manipulated into, again, by some demonic-like force to kill his own parents. And this is where the movie, it does have a bit, has some gruesome parts to it. So I don't know if you want to get that far with your children with that one. Pyewacket might be a little bit more palatable. This is one where the parents end up throwing up until they die. And then this voice ends up being some twisted like witch of a sister that he had, that his parents locked away because apparently she's like a demon or something, right? Well, that's what you get from the movie, because she ends up tearing apart some people that come to the house looking for the boy, and that's where there's some gore, right? But up until then, you can use that to show, hey, there's forces out there that try to be your friend, but they manipulate you to get you to turn on the ones that truly love you, the ones that are going to take care of you. Ultimately, these voices get you to turn away from God, your true Father, the one that truly loves you and cares about you and will take care of you. It gets you to think that He's the evil one, He's the bad one, and you need to fight against Him. You even need to kill Him. And you can see that's exactly what happened when Jesus was here on earth. Jesus didn't do anything wrong to anybody. But there was some spirit in the people that rose up to get them to want to not only beat Him and humiliate Him, but to kill Him. You see, that's the same thing that you can see in this movie. These people manipulated by these forces here, in a sense. One of them is definitely some spiritual thing, and this one is more of a witchcraft manipulation from a brother or a sister, right? Because sometimes that's how it is. You could look at it as Lucifer as a big brother, but he manipulates us into turning on our parents here, right? And sometimes that's how it is. There is a bad apple in the family that manipulates the others into joining them to fight against the parents, the same way that the bad apple is, right? Because the parents notice that one of the children is a bad apple, so they obviously are treating him differently or her differently, right? And now that bad apple is in kind of a war with the parents and will seek allies. So it's like, oh, you love your other children, my brothers and sisters. Well, I'm going to get them to ally with me against you. So sometimes when there's a bad apple in the family, you might have experienced this, whether it was one of your brothers or sisters, or one of your parents' brothers or sisters, or maybe it was one of your own children that you had to basically shun to protect your younger children from their influence. And this is what God did with Lucifer. And Lucifer gets a lot of the world to join him into warring against God, that he's the bad guy. And he manipulates them into thinking that that's true, right? Mom and dad are the evil ones. They're trying to control us and manipulate us, and they don't want us to really be free and all this stuff, right? No, he's a narcissistic, selfish piece of crap, and he's just trying to get people on his side. He already knows that he's kicked out of the house, he's lost the blessing of the parents, so he's trying to get you to lose it too, right? So that you join him in the hatred, so that mom and dad don't have anyone or anything, right? Because that's usually what happens with these, the bad apples there. They try to get back at the parents. Like the rest of their lives, they just hate their parents. You might have met people like this, right? They just hate them. There's some people that they got reason where they're traumatized by their parents, but there's some people who are just no good reason because they're spoiled and they don't think that their parents should have done what they did. They hate them because, I don't get my trust fund until they die or something like that. And it's like, well, you lucky you even have a trust fund, right? You should be thankful for that. But, you know, they just hate them, right? And they try to get back at them. Like they can't just walk away and go about their life. Nope, their whole life, any chance they can, they will dig it to their parents. And this is just to show us as observers and the people who are experiencing this what God is dealing with his creation. So we can better understand and know him, to go through the same things, to suffer with him. But anyway, yeah, you might not want to watch these movies with your children. I get it. I'm just putting that suggestion out there because there is some good lessons from this. If you think your children are mature enough to see these kind of things, and that you have that kind of relationship with them where you can sit here with them and talk about these things to them while you're watching them. Because the way I see it is when there's a movie like this, when there's gore, of course you're not going to show that kind of thing to young children, right? I get that. But at the same time, growing up on a farm, you would see animals get slaughtered. Maybe at a young age you first see it when you go fishing and your dad guts and fillets a fish, right? And maybe on a farm or some other place you see it happen to an animal. It's gross, it's disturbing, it's shocking when you first see that. But it's a way that you can really talk to your children, and with that moment, that shock, whatever you're going to talk with your child about is going to stick. It's going to be one of those core memories. You can be sure of that, right? So you can take those moments of when they first see the dinner being killed to teach them about the sacrifice that's needed to keep us alive. In that same spiritual sense, Jesus had to die to give us spiritual food that we may live. Without it, we would die. Without the death of something else, we can't live, right? So you can use that as a lesson. Not that in these movies when people are dying that it's for your sustenance so that you may live, but, you know, you teach about death and the horrors and how Satan doesn't mind doing that to people, right? He wants to desensitize people to that kind of thing, and you could use that to teach them about those kind of things. Then again, definitely not with young children. This is my personal opinion. You may see it differently, but when they get teenagers, This is something that I wouldn't throw out of the realm of something to do, especially where you don't grow up on a farm and you're not able to show and teach your children about death and how they got their steak dinner, right? Or their baked chicken or their pork sandwich. So they can really understand that kind of thing. Um, but yeah, and then on the other level, there's things with maturity where when they're talking about language and sexual content, all right, that stuff's a little bit different. These movies don't really have that, so it's not something to really worry about. Uh, but at the same time, uh, where I grew up in Maine, there's people who they're saying all kinds of horrible shit. I shouldn't have said that. Horrible crap out on the streets. Like there's a lot of crazy people in like Portland, Maine. A lot of nut jobs. So you got to just explain to your child that there's just some people who that's how they talk. That doesn't mean that it's okay for them to do that. Just like if there's some people drunk out on the street, which there's people are where I grew up, that that's just what they're doing, right? You get to see why you don't want to drink. You see how they're acting, and they're falling all over the place, and they're acting like fools. And do you want to be like that? Well, that's what alcohol does to you, right? You use that as a teaching lesson. You don't hide them from it. I get why you want to hide it from them and protect them from it, but you can use that as a lesson, right? Like my dad was a chain smoker, and he's like, okay, you see me in the morning, I'm coughing up and I hack up these tar balls. And he's like, that's why you don't smoke. And if I catch you smoking, I'm going to whip your ass, right? So you use those things to teach, right? You don't hide the truth from them. I get at a young age, you're not going to share this stuff with a 5-year-old. I get that. That's not what I'm saying to do. But you also can't hide them from it. And sometimes, even when your child's 5, they're going to run into these things, whether it was from one of the bad apple brothers or sisters they have, from a cousin, or from a friend that shows them something like pornography. And then you're going to have to deal with that situation and explain those kind of things to them, right? So you just kind of realize that that's just how it is. You're not going to be able to give your child a perfect life and shelter them from all these things. So you need to be prepared for, hey, I don't know when these things are going to be brought to the attention of my child, and I got to be prepared to talk about that, no matter how weird or uncomfortable it is. So God give me wisdom on how to explain things to them, to reach them on their level, to teach them about these things that I wasn't quite ready to show them and didn't want to show them quite yet, but they learned about it. But anyway, I'm kind of rambling on and going off. So I'll end it here. Thanks for watching. Take care. Alright, here's the 3 verses that I like to put in all the videos here. Isaiah 34:16, seek ye out the book of the Lord and read, so that Jesus doesn't tell you what he tells the Sadducees here in Matthew 22:29, ye do err, not knowing the scriptures. It's not that you are in error because you don't know the one true church that happens to be your denomination, or that you don't know the fundamental beliefs, or the Nicene Creed, the Apostles' Creed, or whatever creed, or that you don't know the magisterium or the clergy, or you don't know your favorite pastor or priest. That's why you're in error. No, you're in error because you don't know the scriptures. You need the scriptures to test to see whether or not those are correct, whether those are the right traditions, whether those are legitimate clergy, whether that church is actually following God, and whether those creeds line up. Those fundamental beliefs are found in the scriptures. Because knowing the scriptures is knowing God. Like we read here in John 17:3, Jesus says, and this is life eternal, that they might know thee, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, whom thou hast sent. This is a deep knowing. As Adam knew Eve and she conceived, you need to know God in like manner, so that you may be born again, that his word, his seed, it abides in your heart, where you truly believe that Jesus Christ is God in the flesh, that he died in your place and gives you his life in exchange, so that your righteousness, your good and your bad, your life, past, present, and future, died 2,000 years ago. Your life is His. He can do what He wants with it. He puts it to death, and He gives you His life in exchange, His perfect, eternal life. That's the deep knowing you need to know of God. So, there you go. Do you know Him? Do you want to know Him? Get to know Him. Thanks again for watching. Take care.
So that fella couldn't join the church. He couldn't join the church. He couldn't get baptized. He couldn't get baptized. He woke up with God. He woke up with the devil. Are you saved? Amen. So that fella didn't take the sacraments. Didn't take the sacraments. Didn't say the rosary. Didn't say the rosary. Didn't tithe. Didn't tithe. He went to heaven. He went to hell. You saved? Didn't keep the law. He didn't keep the law. He broke the commandments. He broke the commandments. He didn't keep the golden rule. He didn't keep the golden rule. He woke up in glory. He woke up in the pit. Are you saved? You're saved. If you're not saved, you're over here or you're over here. You sure ain't in the middle. He said, Lord, remember me, thou comest thy kingdom. And Jesus turned to him and said, verily I say unto thee, today shalt thou be saved. It's like that. You have been saved? If you ever saved, you were saved like that.